Hey guys, welcome back to The Deep. This week we've got a very special guest with us. It's Katie from Disneyland News Today, and I talked to her and I said, "Hey, we're gonna do this show together, right? And here's a list of movies." And I was actually kind of surprised at the one she picked. So, Katie, first, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Rob. I've been looking forward to being on the show.
Yeah,
Um,
and you've done the live shows, so this is pretty
yeah,
exciting for me too. So, you picked what movie?
Pete's Dragon.
And I
So,
said, I said, you mean the new one? And you're like, nah, old
no,
school. Like you wanted the original.
1977, Pete's Dragon. I said, let's do it.
And I'm excited about that. I did a movie, Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, with Alicia, who's also on our staff, and it was more of like a journey for her of like an old movie that she had never seen before. But you're actually a fan of this movie, right?
Yeah, I love the oldies for sure. As a kid, this was a movie, it kind of never made sense to me. Like talking to people, oh, you've never seen Pete's Dragon? Because in my eyes as a kid, it was such a classic. It was like, oh, well, it's the best of the best. It's Pete's Dragon. So it's like drilled in my head. And also I've always loved any animation live action integration. Like
Right.
Roger Rabbit's one of my favorite movies of all time. Three Caballeros is up there. So Pete's Dragon just falls into place in that category. And it's just like one of the ones that I remember the most as a kid, I think. So it's always like it's exciting to see him in the parks anywhere for sure. So I was like, let's do it. Be a fun pick.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got Mary Poppins up behind you too, which to me is like the
Yeah,
quintessential like
very
mix of live and animation.
and another one.
Yeah, exactly. So animation wise, though, Don Bluth was the animation director for the animated part of this movie. And for those that don't know, Don Bluth then left the Disney company eventually and went on to do An American Tail and All Dogs Go to Heaven and The Land Before Time and a whole slew of movies that are very reminiscent of this particular period of time in Disney animation because of when he was there. So I think that lends a lot of credibility to this movie. And again, like you mentioned, it's 1977. I think the animation for mixing a dragon into an entire live landscape, and most of it in daylight too, which is kind of hard to do
Oh
with
yeah, I
animation.
covered that up too. I 100% agree. I think like looking back at it, it's hard to believe it's 1977. It's like Elliott looks so good. How did they do this? And all these there's shots of him in the forest, and he looks right like he fits in. It's perfect. But I agree, the animation's insane.
The only time it messed with me a little bit is like sometimes he seemed bigger than others. Like there's a scene where Pete is sitting on him eating apples, and he looks like he's as big as like a cement mixer truck.
Yeah, he does.
And then there's another time where like right after that where he's kind of rocking Pete and holding him in his hands, and he looks a little bit smaller. So that's just probably me looking through it with a little bit of like 2020, like the year 2020 vision of being a little bit more critical. But I still think it's pretty magical. One thing
Yeah.
that popped out at me is like, and I'm not sure, so don't get mad at me if I've actually ever seen this all the way through before. Because like my kids watched it a little bit, I think when they were younger, and I do think it's a definite classic. And so I think I have the gist of it, but I don't think I literally sat down, devices down, and just stared at this movie before. And it's a very very classic movie.
It
But
really
when it opens up, he's floating. Like the first thing you see is Pete floating, and like if you had no context for this, that'd be weird, right?
in the beginning of the film with the title sequence, there's some really pretty oil pastel, kind of the same as Mary Poppins. In the beginning, there's the artwork that's done with watercolor. This one has oil pastel of the different scenes of Maine and Passamaquoddy, and it's really pretty. And then it transitions into Pete sitting on Elliott, just like floating through the air, and you're kind of like, oh, what is this kid doing? Just floating through the forest. But
Yeah, weird.
it comes to play, but definitely odd for the first few seconds. You're like, what is going on?
Now, let me ask you this because you mentioned the credits. Because you're much younger, is it weird for you? And you said you grew up with a classic, so maybe it's not. Watching movies where you have to sit through the entire credits at the beginning, as opposed to something like an MCU movie, you don't necessarily even see a title card until the end. Is that weird
Yeah,
for you?
definitely different. I've noticed my patience is shorter. Like as a kid, I could sit there and watch it, and like whatever. Yeah, I'm reading it, watching all the pages flash by, but now it's like, ugh, do I need to watch all of it? Should I just skip? And I feel bad for skipping. I'm like, no, give them their credit, watch it. It's fun going back and forth between the two because it's like you're watching a whole different format almost.
Yeah, that's true. And then on top of that, with the Marvel movies, they kind of make you sit through it anyway because you have to see the after credit scene.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Passamaquoddy.
Yes.
Am I actually saying that right? Because there is a character in here, Dr. Terminus, who plays. It's played by Jim Dale, and in this he continually massacres the name of this town, and I feel like that's most people. At least it's definitely me because I'm not as familiar with it as you are. Like, so I'm saying Passamaquoddy. I feel like that's right, but it also seems very supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Am I saying it right? I'm not sure.
I think you are.
He has his whole little sequence, his musical sequence, where he tries to figure out what the name is called, and then the villagers get upset. The villagers of Passamaquoddy say it right.
Right. So Jim Dale, let me talk about him for a second because when I'm watching the credits, there's some of these people that, because I'm a huge movie fan and I've been around a while, I see some of them and I recognize them instantly. But Jim Dale was one that I didn't recognize instantly, and what is interesting to me is that he was in 3 Disney movies in 3 consecutive years. He was in this one in 77, he was in Hot Lead Cold Feet in 78, and he was in Unidentified Flying Oddball, which is actually kind of one of my favorites. I like that movie. It's very odd. I like the odd ones, The Cat from Outer Space and Black Hole and those things. So he was in these 3 back to back, and that was pretty much the end of it. But he is still today doing work as
pretty active.
Yeah, by your expression, you know what I'm talking about.
I was looking at his IMDb, and his latest thing, he was doing voiceovers for video games.
Yes, Harry Potter video games.
Harry Potter video games, yes.
And he also did all of the books on tape for the Harry Potter books, and that I'm like, yes. So that's kind of crazy, especially because, and this was to me again unusual, is that in a lot of these old Disney movies, if you had a British accent, you didn't really hide it. It just was a thing that happened, or if you're an American in a British scene, you didn't hide it either. I don't think they went for as much realism, but in this, he hides his British accent, and he has just a straight American accent in this. So the fact that he's... What's that?
He does pretty well.
Yeah. So the fact that he has, like, that his thing is voicing Harry Potter books is kind of awesome to me.
Yeah. Definitely a fun fact about the film. I knew he did the video games, but I did not know he did the voiceover for the books. That is very...
And I didn't know it off the top of my head, so don't give me too much credit. I mean, obviously... Yeah. I researched this a little bit, but that's what we do in Deep in the Plus. We just go as deep into the movie as we possibly can. So with Shelley Winters is another one that I knew the name and I know that she was a big deal, but in this she is horrible. So she plays his adopted mother in this, and it's not really adoption because she's got a, quote, bill of sale. But she seems like an absolute horrible person. They've got her teeth all messed up. She's rolling around in mud. And this is a woman who won an Academy Award for The Diary of Anne Frank. So, yeah. I mean, that's kind of crazy to me that this is something that she would agree to do, because it is very kind of Don Knotts, Tim Conway, Disney screwball kind of a character that she's playing.
Yeah, when looking at her catalog of films, I was really surprised to see how diverse they all were, from when she was in Anne Frank compared to Pete's Dragon, and the diverse characters she plays. I was incredibly surprised, and she does so... Like, even though she plays a horrible character, she plays it very well. Like, we're all like, ew, like, who is this lady? Like,
yeah.
Bad.
And they were horrible. I mean, this movie is rated G, and Disney Plus warns you for tobacco use. That's fine. I mean, I get it. However, one of the things that gets me is when they don't warn you of everything. There is an extreme amount of alcohol use in here.
Alcohol, and one I noticed was the abuse, kind of, like when Pete was talking about how the adopted father would hit him and stuff like that. I was really surprised there wasn't a warning about that.
Or even when Dr. Terminus is talking about cutting up Elliott. I mean, there's some dark things in there. So again, for them to go, oh, watch out, there's tobacco. again, I get it, but the drinking, like there's that scene in the bar with Helen Reddy and with Mickey Rooney where she's going around and they're just slamming beer all over the place and it's squirting all over the place. He walks out and he's smashed when he sees Elliott for the first time. I mean, it's
most
like
of the movie he plays that he's just like an old drunk who wanders around his lighthouse and wherever he can.
And then even Elliott gets drunk. So, I mean, if I'm a little kid in 1977 and I see Elliott drinking and then he gets to breathe fire, I might get a few thoughts. You know, so I do think it's kind of weird that, as you mentioned, the domestic violence, the just kind of the whole tone of it is a little bit dark. And I wonder if today this might have actually gotten a PG rating instead of a G.
I definitely think it would be higher than a G at this point.
Yeah. Let me talk a little bit of some more cast in this one. So Helen Reedy plays Nora. Helen Reedy, to me, I know who she is because she sang a lot of songs that my parents sang all the time, like "I Am Woman," and so I know her from that. And for her to be an actress, she has like 13 IMDb credits, and so as far as acting goes, most everything else is music. So it's kind of cool to me that she did this. I think this was her like second or third thing that she did. But again, to the accent, she is Australian, but she is basically pulling off an American accent the entire time, which again in 77 I don't think was something that she necessarily did.
And she does it so beautifully too. Her voice in the film is beautiful. She plays, I think, one of the best characters in the film. As a little girl watching it, I think I looked up to her a lot as like a female character in a Disney movie. Like she was taking care of her dad, like she did a lot to help around the town, like she took in this boy. I think she was a good figure for me to look up to. And like even watching this now later or years later on, it's still the same. It's like, wow, she is a good character. I'm proud to like see her in the Disney family.
Yeah, and a strong female role model. I mean, I feel like, because to your point, she is taking care of everybody, but she has her own job of taking care of the lighthouse. She sees this boy in trouble and she takes him in. She's taking care of her dad. She's standing up to people in town, like the teacher and the fisherman. I mean, it's just a very strong character, male or female. It's a strong character, and so I think that it's great that she was in this. Something very kind of like out there about Helen Reedy is that one of her IMDb listings is for Family Guy, and
really?
It was for Blue Harvest. She was in 2, but she was listed for Blue Harvest, which makes me think Seth MacFarlane is probably a Helen Reedy fan. Same as me, probably grew up listening to like parents singing the music and all. But there's a scene where they're doing the takeoff of Star Wars with Red Leader standing by, you know, Red 5 standing by, and then it's Simply Red standing by, and then it's Helen Reedy standing by, and she voiced that herself, which is awesome. I mean, is awesome. That's great. But the funny thing to me about that too is that there's also a scene where it's Red Buttons standing by. Now, Red Buttons was in this movie. I feel like I've made a connection with Helen Reedy, who was in there, and Red Buttons, who was in there. 2 people from Pete's Dragon are in that one scene from random Blue Harvest Family Guy Star Wars parody. So I thought that was kind of cool. Charlie Callis, the voice of Elliott, I looked at his IMDb,
he doesn't have much other stuff that stands out as much as Pete's Dragon does, but he is in a lot of stuff still now. Like there was a lot of recent stuff I was surprised as, Elliott's still doing stuff.
Yeah, right? So, I mean, I recognize him, like, in his image and feel like I've seen him before, but I don't really know that I know him from anything else, like you said, other than Pete's Dragon. But I don't know that I could have told you before watching this that Elliott actually had a voice, because he just sort of, a lot of times, just makes noises or a kind of a nonsense.
Yeah. Someone had to do the weird whoa, 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 whoa.
I'm sorry, could you do that again?
No, that was a one time.
Darn it. Okay, so Jim Backus, who plays the mayor of the town, again, from watching reruns, I did not watch the original run of Gilligan's Island. Old, but not that old. He was on Gilligan's Island as Mr. Howell, and so that would have been, that run would have ended before this movie. So he was Mr. Howell before he was the mayor. And then he was also the voice of Mr. Magoo in the cartoons, if you ever saw those. It was interesting to me. Like, I see him, and I really just see him as Mr. Howell. So that was a little bit like took me out of it a little bit for him. But again, a pretty good cast for this movie.
And they're all from different spots. Like, they all have their credited work, but not too much interlapping. They're all from pretty different backgrounds of history in film and television. I mean, even Jim Dale did the Harry Potter voiceovers for the books.
Yeah. So you said that you were a big fan of this movie when you were a kid. It's a pretty long movie for a kid, no? 2 hours and 8 minutes?
2 hours and 8 minutes. It is pretty long. When I watched it today, I was like, no way it's this long. Really. And there's a lot that folds into it. Like, sitting there, like, wow, I forgot this part's here, I forgot this part's here. It just keeps unwrapping new little stories inside of it.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, when I sat down, I was expecting a 90-minute thing, because a lot of animated are 90 minutes, and I saw 2 hours and 8 minutes, and I was like, okay, buckle up, this is going to be a while. But I mean, it goes pretty fast, and it kind of covers a lot of territory. If it was sitting in one spot the entire time, that may be a little bit harder to take. But it does take you on a journey, and so I think that the time passed pretty well. We talked a little bit about, you said you liked seeing stuff with Pete's Dragon in the parks, and I know that you cover Disneyland. One of the things that strikes me is that I can't tell you how many times I love seeing Elliott in the Main Street Electrical Parade. That to me is one of my favorite floats from the Main Street Electrical Parade. Sometimes the kid who played, or the guy who plays Pete is a little cheesy.
So when the movie first came out and the Main Street Electrical Parade was at Disneyland, Sean Marshall, who played Pete in the movie, actually played Pete in the Main Street Electrical Parade for the first few years.
That's like a 2-for-1. So you still get to see Elliott, and you actually get to see Sean Marshall in the parade. That's pretty neat. But here's what drives me crazy, and you tell me if you've ever experienced this. You're in the park and you're watching the parade, and you hear somebody say to their kid, "Look, it's Pete the Dragon."
Yeah.
All the time, it's Pete the Dragon, because they feel like that's the dragon's name is Pete because of the movie.
I hear Reluctant Dragon. People think he's the Reluctant Dragon a lot. Because when I moved to California in August, and it was the final run of the Main Street Electrical Parade.
Right.
And I was so excited. I was like, you know what? As a kid, I watched this at Disneyland, and now I'm moving here and it's at Disneyland. This is awesome. And my first few days I was here, every night I was sitting there seeing it, because it's nostalgic. It makes you feel like you're at home. It's the Main Street Electrical Parade. Nothing beats it. So coming back and seeing it, and seeing Elliott in the parade, it was definitely special. And it's just one of those movies. It sticks with me.
So, are there any other places you can think of, though, that they include this IP in the parks? Because I feel like the only thing that I could think of immediately was Main Street Electrical Parade.
Right. That's where he's at. I mean, every so often you can find a pin, but not much. I wish there was more of him.
You've got Mary Poppins and Pete's Dragon up on your wall together, and I kind of feel like they're sort of in the same category. I mean, obviously, Mary Poppins came well before Pete's Dragon, but I feel like they are both pieces of Disney history, and important pieces at that. So it is surprising to me that there aren't more references. Let's talk about the practical effects real quick in this movie, because again, 1977, there were some pretty good practical effects. Which ones stand out to you? I'll let you go first.
I thought the cement, where Elliott was walking on the wet cement, but he is invisible to everyone in the town, but you can see his footprints. Yeah. I was like, that's pretty good. Like, it looks very realistic.
I don't know how they did it, still.
No, I have no idea. I was like, I doubt I can even find online how they did this.
Yeah. And the one with him going through the wall of the school, and twice even, again, I think was a really neat physical effect to that, because obviously there's a lot of the movie where you don't see him, and then Sean Marshall must have had to, like, he was basically doing CGI acting before that was an actual thing, where he's looking in directions where there's not going to be anything. So, I mean, there's not going to be holding like a tennis ball or anything, because in most of these he's invisible. Which is a question that I have too about this, which I don't really necessarily want to pull this thread, but how does he see him when he's invisible, but then also knows when he's not invisible?
That is true. So, like, where does he draw the line?
In the opening, when he's hiding from Shelley Winters and gang. He is looking at him and saying, "No, Elliott, don't swing your tail. No, don't do this." And he's looking at him as if he knows what things Elliott is doing, but we see him as invisible.
So it's almost they chose where they want to put him in.
Yeah, I guess it just seemed a little bit weird. I need to know, like, again, my 2020 vision. I need to know the mechanics, the rules. Like, I can believe that Superman can fly if you tell me the rules of how he can fly, and then I'll completely buy into it.
I'm the opposite. I'll believe it. He's looking at Elliott. He's looking at Elliott.
Well, again, this is a movie that was one of your favorites. What else about this movie did, like, really kind of drew you to it, though?
I really think I have a pattern. My favorite movie is E.T., and I was pulling these comparisons today. I'm thinking, Elliott's there to help Pete get safe. Like, Elliott comes, make sure he finds the family he needs to be with, and then at the end of the movie, do we talk about the end of the movie? Or do we leave it?
No, you can.
So at the end of the movie, Elliott decides to leave and tells Pete he has to go help another kid. And it I was like, kind of like E.T. almost. Like, he helps Elliott and then he heads back to the Green Planet. I was like, makes sense. I like both of these. I think I just like the little partner duo. It's nostalgic. It's heartwarming. It's a good story. I love stories like that to follow, I think.
Well, and Mary Poppins was like that a little bit too. She comes in, she helps them, and then she leaves.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe I do have a pattern.
You just like it when they come in, they have a happy story, but then they just get out. That's basically your MO,
and
right?
They live their life. Like, I know E.T.'s out doing something great right now. Elliott's helping a different kid.
That sounds about right. Yeah. And the comparison could be Elliott. I mean, the little boy in E.T. is Elliott and Elliott the dragon. So maybe that's, if we could compare somebody in Mary Poppins to Elliott, we would have a trilogy on our hands.
Too much.
One of the other physical effects that I love that I think was brilliant was when they dropped the tarp on Elliott.
100%. I was really wondering. I was like, I wonder if they built something to put under it or they had people under there, but it looked like the same dimensions that they had animated him.
Yeah, and it made something that was invisible and animated be physical and real. Even to the people around him who were riding on it or trying to tie him down, and they just did such a good job of that I was just like, bravo. Like, it was so good that I was super impressed. Like, it stood out how good it was. There's a new show on Disney Plus, Prop Culture, and I don't know that there would be enough props in this movie to go back and dig up. But to your point of how did they do that, and then also the cement, it would be interesting to go back and see if anybody has any, like, the original mechanics of how all that stuff works. So
it would be close to the Roger Rabbit Prop Culture, probably, because they did a lot of that looking back in how they had Roger spitting water and stuff. So it would definitely be interested to see that Pete's Dragon versionized, but we can hope.
Let me talk about the music for a second too. Again, Helen Reedy, great voice. She had released a couple of these, or they had released a couple of these as singles apparently back in the day. So it was really good. I'm going to be showing how clueless I am in a way. Is that the song "Candle on the Water"? So "Candle on the Water" is a big song from this movie. There was a time where my son sang it at school. And it was from Pete's Dragon, so I was like, "Oh, cool! You're singing, a song from a Disney movie." It never occurred to me until this showing that the lighthouse is the candle on the water. That's how clueless I was about this, because I pictured one of those like Ebenezer Scrooge holding the candle things, floating on the water. I'd never, and I'm just looking at it, going, duh, of course it's the lighthouse. And the lighthouse is such a central thing to this entire movie. Her living in the lighthouse, she's living with her dad in the lighthouse. They're taking care of it. They are the kind of like holding this town together from the lighthouse because of how important it is to the ships that come in. She's waiting for her fiance to come back. They go up in it. They can see the view of it. It's very central, and so I can't believe I missed that.
It's such a beautiful song. That really has to be one of my favorites from the film. But back to like how good of a character she really portrays. She is the candle on the water. Like, she's what's there to guide people, and I think it's a really meaningful song for the movie. Like, it's definitely the one that stands out the most. and show it. Not only shows what the movie's centered around, but also what her character is centered around on, and how she helped.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. So one other thing I want to talk about before we move into what, whether you recommend this or not, is I don't think we can talk about this one without mentioning the remake. And when we talked about this, and this is the one that you wanted to watch, and I sat down and saw it was 2 hours and 8 minutes. Originally, I had thought maybe I'll watch both of them. Didn't have enough time to watch both of them, but I have seen the remake with Bryce Dallas Howard, and a couple things that I noticed about it. But in your passion for this original movie, I assume you've seen the new, and what did you think of it?
Sad story. I saw half of it and I hated it. I turned it off.
Wow.
It just didn't, like, there were aspects that followed, but I was just kind of over it. I wasn't really intrigued. I think I love the original so much for its silliness. Like, it is a goofy little animated live action heartwarming film, where this one was a little bit more mysterious, and they're in this forest and he's this big, like, fierce dragon.
Yeah.
It was hard. But what did you think about it?
Well, one of the things I noticed immediately was it's not a musical. I mean, there's talk of the new Mulan movie that it's not a musical, and what does that mean? And I've seen the new Mulan movie, and I think it stands well on its own, but it is very different because it's not a musical. And I don't think it had as many songs in it as the 1977 Pete's Dragon song, as the 1977 Pete's Dragon movie did. It had a lot of music.
A music-heavy film.
Yes.
It's a musical, 100%.
Right.
So it was so odd to just, like, even in the beginning, within the first 5 minutes of this film, there's music, where it was just, like, it made it slower, I think. I did not see the whole thing, though, so I cannot justify it.
Now, I liked the movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I almost feel like it should have been called something else other than Pete's Dragon. Like, they could have used this formula, and it could have been anything else. It had more of an Escape to Witch Mountain kind of a vibe to it, because they were trying to, rescue him and get him back to where he needed to be and all that stuff. So it was a little bit different in that aspect, but there were no crazy hillbillies. It was no musical, to your point, that it was a much more serious movie. So it was an interesting choice to me how different it was. Now, that said, I do like it when a live action remake is different from its original animation version. Lion King, I don't have a reason to go back and watch the new one, because I love the old one, and they're almost identical to me because of the lines are the same, the jokes are the same, the songs are the same. I don't see a lot of need to watch the newer one. With this one, I think they are two different movies, so I think I'll go back and watch it again, but it doesn't seem like it's a Pete's Dragon remake.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if it wasn't Pete's Dragon, I would like it more.
So one of the cast members we didn't talk about, who I think was probably a bigger draw than a lot of these folks at the time, was Mickey Rooney, and I think he did a great job in this.
Mickey, he's definitely one of the most fun characters to watch, and I think he plays that in most of the movies he's in. But in this film, he was like the passageway. He was like, oh my gosh, like, I see this dragon too, and people was like, what is going on? Someone else sees him, and the whole movie he plays that, and at the end he comes together and they all live happily ever after, and he pulls it all together, I think. But he's definitely one of the bigger names from the film.
So, Katie, with all of that said, and obviously knowing this is your favorite movie, I'm going to ask you if you recommend this movie, but I also want to know from you if you think this stands the test of time, having seen it just recently through new eyes. So would you recommend this movie?
I 100% would recommend this movie. I think it's a Disney classic that it's feel good. Like, you can watch it with your family, you can watch it by yourself. It's going to cheer you up. It's one of those films, and the characters are iconic and memorable, but does it stand the test of time? Probably not as much as we'd hope it does. There are definitely depictions in it that wouldn't be seen today if this film was remade in the same sense. So there's definitely things to look out for when you're watching it. Have an open mind, be careful. But other than that, I would recommend it. It's a classic. I think, like, kids growing up who are experiencing the Disney parks, I think it's an important one for them to see, for sure.
So yeah, I agree with you. And a lot of the ones that we look at are actually, to me, pieces of Disney history. And if you're a Disney fan, I think you absolutely need to watch this movie. I do think that it is probably a little slow. There are some things that are probably a little of the time and maybe a little cheesy about it. But I think that's what makes it kind of like gives it heart. My son walked by while I was watching it, and he was just kind of like, "What is happening here?" He was kind of making fun of Elliott's voice a little bit, but he hadn't watched the whole movie. And so I like this movie. I would definitely recommend it for anyone who's a Disney fan. And then even if you're not a huge Disney fan, I think you should watch it. I think it's an important film in the Disney library. And so if you agree with us or disagree, we'd love to get your comments. You can comment below or hit us up at Deep in the Plus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And again, Katie, thank you so much for picking this movie and reviewing this movie with me.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, have a brazzle dazzle day.
Yeah, brazzle dazzle. Right.
All right, Katie, so now it's time for your pick of the week. What do you like this week?
This week, my pick is Babes in Toyland. Now, I decided to pick this one this week because I think it followed suit to Pete's Dragon. It's in the same realm. It's a musical, fun to watch, but it's so much. This film is just packed with so much good stuff. There's Sylvester the Talking Goose and toy soldiers and Bo Peep, and it's just every little bit of nursery rhyme you've ever heard from anywhere brought in to tell a story about a little storybook village and all their main characters. And basically Annette Funicello and Tommy Sands go all the way to Toyland, and they meet Edwin and Tommy Kirk, and they help. It's basically a holiday movie. They help put together toys for Christmas, and they sing, and it's a blast. It's really fun. I think you can watch it any time of the year, even though it is technically a holiday film. But there's some big faces in it. Annette Funicello is one of the original Musketeers. Ray Bolger actually plays the villain, and he is the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. So as a kid, it was always fun, like loving musicals so much, like watching Wizard of Oz and then watching Babes in Toyland and making the connection. Who else? Ed Wynn, obviously like a Disney legend, is in it. Tommy Kirk, who is in The Monkey's Uncle, which is another great Disney film. But it's so many good faces in one spot for sure. It's a great film. If Pete's Dragon is something you're interested in or something you like, Babes in Toyland is something else that you would definitely enjoy.
Do you have a favorite song from this one?
Oh, the music is so good. Favorite song? I Can't Do the Sum by Annette or Just a Toy by Annette. I love her. She is probably one of my favorite, like every single album on vinyl. Love her.
That is so cool. Again, like I feel like most of the people who are your age are going to talk about Hercules or Little Mermaid or some of that stuff, and so I think it's really neat that you have like this kind of all-encompassing knowledge of the classics, which is really awesome. And I'm super jealous of all of those albums up behind you on the wall. So ironic that I went the complete opposite way, and for my pick, that I picked something that is very new. It was made specifically for Disney Plus. It's a Disney Plus original, and it's called Stargirl. Now, here's something funny about that is the CW has also started a Stargirl series, which is a superhero, and so it's really funny that there are two things that exist around the same time called Stargirl that have nothing to do with each other. In this one, Grace VanderWaal, who plays the Stargirl, which is kind of a hippie role, and I think it's interesting to me because I feel like that's kind of who she is, so I'm not really sure how much of a stretch this was for her, but she won America's Got Talent, definitely had a great voice, ukulele, wrote her own songs, and so I was impressed with her when she did that. She's had a couple hits since then, and she's just very talented, and I think she did an amazing job in what is obviously her first starring role, no pun intended, for this movie called Stargirl. So the basic gist of the story is that there is this boy in high school, he's having some problem fitting in, he's in the band, and then all of a sudden this girl comes out of nowhere, seemingly. She had been homeschooled, he's not really sure of her history, and she kind of takes the school by storm being herself, which my teenage daughter watched this with me and felt this was kind of cringy because she's doing all kinds of things that a teenage girl shouldn't be doing. She is getting out of her comfort zone. She's standing up in front of people. She is being herself. She tells everybody her name is Stargirl. That's really not the kind of thing you want to do if you want to fit in. But this movie, they show if you can be yourself, you can actually be someone, and that's really kind of cool to me, that's the message that this was leaving. Now, I'm not sure that I would watch this one again and again, but I think it was a nice movie and it had a good message. So I would definitely recommend that anyone who has kind of seen this and sort of maybe passed over it, it's only an hour and 45 minutes. It's something fun to watch. You may want to watch it with your family. It's definitely an interesting story, and so that's all I'll say about it, but I would recommend Stargirl. And again, if you have other comments about the movies we've recommended, or maybe movies you think we should do down the road, we would love to get your input, and you can leave us a comment below or hit us up at Deep in the Plus on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. So thank you again, Katie, for all of your help in this episode. I appreciate it. Great talking to you, and make sure to get Disneyland open for us soon, would you?
I'm trying. Thank you so much, Bob.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.